It's so hard to describe that level of disappointment and heartbreak. I am going to eat this up. Like, this is going to be love. Back again. Back again for another month. Hi everyone, I'm Gabrielle. Thanks for tuning in to today's video. I'm excited to just have a chat where I talk about all the books that I read in March. Can't believe March is over. This year, like, of course I know everyone says like, oh, the years go quickly, and normally of course time does go quickly, but I feel like this year is really zooming for me. Life is just like crazy busy. But it's been a lot of good things. So I'm very grateful that it's been more on the positive side of things for me, because I know that it's very challenging and, you know, life has its ebbs and flows. The end of last year was pretty rough for me, so I'm glad to be out of that and on to more of a positive, have more positive experiences, at least for now. I've been really, you know, pleased with how much I've been able to read so far this year. I feel like I've been averaging like 10 books a month, give or take a few DNFs thrown in there. And yeah, this month I read 10 books. So I want to share with you how I felt reading 10 books, what I learned about myself, what I learned about my reading preferences, and maybe give you some recommendations. Let's get into it. Okay, so the first book I actually read this month was The Atlas 6. I believe the author's name is Olivia Blake. I thought I had heard people refer to her as Olivia Blake, but then when I looked at the cover, it's O-L-I-V-I-E, Olivia. So I think maybe she's French or something. Either way, cool name. And yeah, so The Atlas 6 is a popular series. I think the third book in the series will be released maybe later this year. I'm not totally sure, but I know it was, you know, well known and popularly reviewed, and so I was interested. So I had it on hold for my library, and I finally got off the list to check it out, the ebook. So I did, and I really enjoyed it. So it's commonly grouped amongst the dark academia novels that are popular, such as The Secret History, If We Were Villains, and a few others that I haven't yet read. Gothicana is one that's claimed as dark academia. I did a whole video about Gothicana, but it's really more of like a romance, but not romantic, if that makes sense, and it's not academic in any way. It just takes place at a school. Anyway, that's besides the point. Let me not rant about Gothicana. Atlas 6, okay. So yeah, it's claimed as dark academia, where basically it's this magical world. People have all different variety of powers. And so these 6 people from all over the world are recruited to join this group where Atlas as a man is their like caretaker, and they're studying in this like secret society where at the end of like a year of studying, they will have to choose someone to be eliminated from the group, and the remaining will be sort of like initiated into the society. I'm forgetting like the names of the groups, but that doesn't really matter for the point of this. They're like learning, all the 6 individuals are learning like the strengths of each other's powers. Some have control over like physics. One girl has control over like, she can like read people's minds and then can like influence them. She's very gorgeous. Another guy has control over people's emotions, so he can like make them feel certain ways, which is very dangerous when used negatively, which he indeed does. Another man can see through charms, I think is what they call it. So like spells that people have done to hide the image of things. If people have altered their appearance through magic, if they've done anything through magic, he can see through that and see what something is truly supposed to be or what it looks like, which at first he thinks is just like useless, like for beauty. Okay, he can see if someone is covering a pimple. Like he thinks it's just kind of dumb and useless, but it reveals to be much more. Another girl has control over like plants. I kept envisioning Layla from Sky High because like the plants speak to her, and she's kind of like a battery. Like she's an endless source of power, and it's mostly channeled through nature is how it comes across in the book, but she can like give power to other people and it just drains her. So yeah, that's kind of like the group. That there's two, the physicists, if I didn't specify. And yeah, so they go under like all these adventures. There's like different challenges they have to complete that are more academically inclined as they're studying. And they're studying like if you can see time and like build a wormhole to jump from one place and appear in another place. Like it's really more academic than like a lot of the other novels I've read that claim to be dark academia. Like we actually are hearing about what they're studying and learning, and I really enjoyed it. It's very like suspenseful in the end, and I know that there's already the second one released, and I think it's going to be a trilogy overall, but I really enjoyed it. I will say, so I give it 4 stars, but as I was thinking of my thoughts right when I finished it, it feels kind of like a book where like when you're reading it, you're like, wow, this is so good. But then once you think about it a little bit more, it's like, I don't actually know if this book will like stick with me long term. You know, like if I'm giving something 5 stars, like it's emotionally impacted me. Like this is something that I will remember and like love forever, you know, whatever forever means, but like this is something that will stick with me. Like I love it, and 4 stars is, you know, right next to that. So I gave it 4 stars, but I really feel like in the long run, it kind of is more of a 3-star for me, which is still good, but it just didn't have like emotional impact, if that makes sense. Like I liked 2 of the characters a lot because they were like spunky, and I don't know, they were just more like interesting than some of the more meek and like nervous characters, but I just didn't necessarily connect with any of them to really like invest myself in it for the long term. The next 3 books are a series. So after January's like just really bad reading month where I was like not enjoying any of the books that I read, I really leaned into like short books, like short, quick romance books were what I was reading a lot of in February. And so I continued that this month. After reading Atlas 6, I was kind of like, okay, that was a bit more like heavy, a little bit more thought-provoking. So let me have a little bit of a break and jump into something short. And I will say, so I just released my video where I read Crescent City, which is one of the books I read throughout March. So I won't give all my thoughts here, but know that I read Crescent City, and while I was reading it, I struggled so bad to finish it. Oh, hi Milo. I struggled so much to finish Crescent City. Like it was very boring for me for a lot of it. Oh, there's my puppy. Hi you. It was just hard, and I did not want to lose my motivation for reading overall, which I think if I had only read that book at the time I was reading it, I would have. So while I read Crescent City, on the times where I was taking a break, I read the WITSEC series. So it's WITSEC is the name of the series, with the books being Find Me, Save Me, and Love Me. And there will be a 4th one, but it's going to be released in November of this year. So for WITSEC, it stands for like witness protection something. Like the book has a name for what the witness protection program is, but it is a fantasy kind of, no, it's not fantasy. What am I saying? it's not fantasy. It's a contemporary romance with reverse harem where the main character, Shiloh, is in the witness protection program in high school. So her teacher became obsessed with her, and it's kind of dark, like the scenes that it describes. So make sure to read the warnings before, if you are considering reading this series. But she's in witness protection program because one of her high school teachers became obsessed with her. He tried to assault her while she was in school. I think he was fired, of course, and then he stalked her and attacked her family. And so she's now an orphan. Her parents are gone due to him, as well as her twin sister. She's alone in the world. The only person she has is her uncle, who was her mom's brother, who's also been impacted by this teacher, you know, taking her family, eliminating them. When Mr. X, the teacher, was doing all that stuff, she had to leave. So she was like in her senior year of high school and she wasn't able to finish. She went to Alaska to live with her uncle, her mom's brother, and they lived there for a year. Now, after that time, the police force and her uncle are like, okay, like you should finish high school, you should re-enter society, start living some kind of a life. So she picks a random place on the map and decides to move to Arizona. She buys a house with money that her parents left her in their will, and so yeah, she's gonna finish up high school. She's moving there on her own while her uncle goes off and continues to try to find Mr. X. I was living alone in this house in Arizona. So I don't want to give too many spoilers in the story because it is a series, but they were super easy to read. I will say that. Like each one I think was like under 300 pages. So I basically read like one each day when I was avoiding reading Crescent City. The quality of them were not what I would normally say is good, but they were easy to read and like entertaining. So if you're looking for something that's not like super high quality writing, but is still enjoyable, like I would say check these out. Yeah, it was interesting, and I'll be finishing it because I want to know what happens. Like it's not my favorite, but it was still entertaining. So of course I read Crescent City. I have that whole video about that, but the next one that I read was actually for my book club that I'm a part of in person, and that was Piranesi. It's by Susanna Clark, and it is another one that I had seen so many places. I received so many recommendations to read this book that it was like mystical and magical, and people were like emotionally impacted by it. And so in my book club, we'll normally like each person will say a book they want, and then we'll do like a random selection. So this was my submission, and it was selected. Coffee break, because thinking back to this book, I was like, oh my gosh. The amount of disappointment I feel when a book I was like so ready to love just is not good. Like, it's so hard to describe that level of disappointment and heartbreak, but Piranesi did that to me. This was, yeah, completely disappointing to me. So from the description, the synopsis of the book, and everything I had heard about it, I thought it was gonna be kind of more like mystical, fantastical. They said it was fantasy, so I was expecting some kind of like magical elements, and really it was not that. So it's a short story. The main character is Piranesi, and it follows him. He's like living in this house with endless halls. There's like tons of statues, and he like every day he does the same thing. He like collects seaweed so he can dry it and burn it to warm himself in the winter. He goes and looks at the statues that are in these endless halls, and then like once a week he meets the other, who is like the only other man that he knows of living in this house. There are a bunch of like skeletons in the house, and so he knows that there were people beforehand, but like as far as he knows, this house is like the entire world. And so he imagines what life would be like if there were other people out there. And that same thing happens. Like basically we're following his day and him journaling about his days and reading about that for like 200 pages. I don't even remember how long it was. There's some twists where ultimately in the end we learn that the house that he's in is not the world. There is an actual real world, our world out there. And so he is kind of saved from that through some twists. But I found it completely anticlimactic. Like, I did not get what the point of the story was, what the message was, and I don't think it was done in the right way. Like, I think it could have been half as long, so much less repetition, and I think it should have been clear what the point was. Like, I didn't really enjoy how it was written. Like, and this is, okay, so one of my favorite authors of all time is Madeline Miller. I think she writes so poetically. It truly just like hits you in the heart when you're reading her words. Like, it is just so impactful. Like, I can't even describe, like, I've said it before to my friends. I can't remember if I've said it in a video, but like the way Madeline Miller writes feels like how I think in my dreams. Like when I'm dreaming, like that is what Madeline Miller is writing. Like, she is just so like, I feel like her writing for me is like otherworldly. Like, that's how much I love it and feel like it's so just like magical. And she, I think, could like give it a positive recommendation of Piranesi, and like people were comparing this book to Madeline Miller. So I was like, oh my gosh, I am going to eat this up. Like, this is going to be my next favorite. And it was absolutely not. I did not enjoy it. I found it so boring, repetitive, and drab. So I was very, very disappointed in that. I would actually like to understand like what the point of the story was. So if you have read it and you felt like it did impact you in some way, please let me know, like, what did you take from it? Like, I felt kind of dumb, to be totally honest, because I didn't know like what I was supposed to be reading, and I very well could have missed something. I'm not gonna lie, like I could have just totally been oblivious to what the point of the story was. So if you know what it was, please let me know, because I read a lot of reviews and a lot of people were like, the house will stay with me, like this story is so impactful, but I wasn't really able to gather like what exactly about it was meaningful to people. So if you have read it, I would genuinely like really like to know you know, what was so powerful about it for you, because I think then that would give me a bit more perspective. So appreciate it. So I started reading the Bonds That Tie series by J. Bree, which is a really popular fantasy romance reverse harem series. I enjoyed the first one. It's another one of those series where like the quality of writing isn't what I would say is like good or like great quality, but they're very easy to read. They're more colloquial. It feels like you're just thinking, I don't know how to describe it other than colloquial. Like, it feels like modern day speech is just like what the author is writing down, which doesn't always translate well to high quality, because if I'm talking like this, like it sounds so regular, whereas if you're writing, normally you're being more like succinct, more descriptive, if that makes a bit more sense. So this is another one of the series similar to the WITSEC series, where it's kind of just more like, you could literally imagine like the author's thoughts, just her writing that down. So, but they're easy to read and they're enjoyable. I have like a few laughs from them. So it's, I believe, 6 total books in the series, and this month I read the 4th one. After reading the 3rd one last month, I kind of lost interest in this series. It got like quite slow, and I really enjoyed the first one because it was short. I think it was like 300 pages, and it moved a little bit quicker, but then towards the 2nd and 3rd books, like she started dragging it out, and there was just like less interesting things happening. So I do wish it had been condensed. I'm not sure yet if I'm gonna finish the series, but Overall, it follows Oleander. I don't know if they call her Oli or Ollie. I say it Ollie in my head, but it's Ollie. It's a girl who her parents died in a car accident years ago, and so she was kind of like on her own, living in the world as a teenager for a few years. In this society, it's fantasy, so people have different magical elements, and they are also part of bond groups. So there's like a blood test you can do to know who is in your bond group and who you will need to bond with when you're older, and those, you know, will be your groups. There's usually one central bond and one or multiple bonded to that central bond. Ollie's mother was a central bond, and I think she had like 4 fathers, aka 4 men bonded to her mother, and Ollie herself has, 5 men in her bond group, and she's the central bond. So she knew that when she was young, but she was running from them, and you learn over the course of the series that she was running because she has this incredible power within her, and when you bond with people, your power grows stronger, and she has powers to like decimate large groups of people, and she didn't want to lose control over that and just like kill endlessly by being bonded to those in her group. So she ran for them for many years. So at the start of the series, that's the main conflict, is them finding her, them trying to understand why she ran from them, and her getting closer to them. So yeah, the series progresses from there. The 4th book in the series, they're like, I just found like at this point in the series, things just got so repetitive. Like there's this same kind of battle scene over and over where there's this group of resistance members who are basically like trying to control all of the magical beings out there and like kill people and take advantage of them. So Ollie and her bond group are part of the ones that are trying to destroy those that are like killing other people and like defend them. So there's kind of like the same scene over and over again where they go to a resistance camp. She uses her power, everyone gets killed, they go back home. They're wondering when the next attack from the resistance is gonna happen. They learn it's, oh, they're hiding in this secret area. They go, she kills people, they go back home. Like, it was just so like not interesting. And there's this big cliffhanger from the last book where they think that Ollie's best friend possibly betrayed them all. And in the very early parts of this most recent book, the 4th one, Ollie's like, oh, she would never do that. And so she just acts as if her friend like didn't betray them while investigating to see if she did. And I understand like wanting to give Ollie positive relationships out of just the relationship she has with the men in her bonded group, because that's one big criticism I will say of the series, is that Ollie basically like only ever interacts with the men in her bonded group. She has like no friends, and like no one else in their society like matters. Like we never hear from anybody. But her relationship with her best friend Sage is just so lackluster as well. I would have loved to see more intrigue with more suspicion and like leaning into the cliffhanger. Like if it's gonna be a cliffhanger and a big plot point, I would love to have seen more suspicion of the best friend. And there just wasn't, so whatever. This month, I also did a reread of the 1st book in the Plated Prisoner series. Oh, say that 5 times fast. Plated Prisoner series. The book is Guild, and this series is, if not my number one of my top 5 favorite fantasy romance series of all time. It is the book that truly got me back into reading in my adult life, and I like will forever be grateful for this book. I love the series so much, and it's another one that's like a super easy read. Like it's very quick. I think it's like under 350 pages, and it's just so easy to read. I love Raven Kennedy's writing. Like I think she does a great job, and I love the book. So I was so happy to do a reread about it, and I'm gonna continue rereading the rest of the series slowly over the course of the year, because the last one in the series comes out I think in November of this year. So yeah, Loved that one, as always. Okay, next book that I read, second to last one, is Six Scorched Roses by Carissa Broadbent. I did another video about the first book I ever read from Carissa Broadbent, which is the... Okay, I was just blanking on the name of it because the second book in that same series is coming out this month, and so I was thinking of that title, but the first book is called The Serpent and the Wings of Night. It's gotten some popularity across social media, and I think I saw it one or two places from people that I trust their recommendations for, and I read it a few months ago and loved it. Like, I was so into it. It was basically like Hunger Games Twilight, because it had like vampires and there was a deadly competition. It was so good. I loved it, and I really enjoy how Carissa writes, like her actual writing style. Very reminiscent of Sarah J. Maas, and I really like how Sarah J. Maas writes, so it was just perfect. Like, I love how Carissa Broadbent writes. And she released a novella this month called Six Scorched Roses, which I had to read, and yeah, it's just amazing. So it's set in the same world that her Nyaxia series is. So The Serpent and the Wings of Night, and the second book, The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King, they're in the Nyaxia series. So the world that that series takes place in is the same world that this novella takes place in, but the novella is like a very far away land, completely separate from the characters in the first book, though there will be some involvement of the characters from the novella in the series later on. If you're interested, you can read the novella at any point. You don't have to read it after Serpent and the Wings of Night, but I personally would say to read it after, because having like the context of the world and being invested in the characters from that world just made it so easy to like be invested in this world. But I absolutely loved this novella. So it was really short. It was, how long was it? It was 187 pages. So I read it in a few hours. 5 stars. It was so good. It follows our main character Lilith, who is a human, and in her town they've always prayed to this specific god to bless them, and he always consistently blessed their town. But then years ago, like around when she was born, something happened where that god no longer had favor on their town, and now everything is just dying. The land is dead, they're not fruitful with, growing harvests, whatever, and the people are also dying. There's like this sickness where people are kind of like withering into dust until they just crumble and they're gone, and you're like, they're constantly like shedding dust is how they describe it. So there's always like sweeping happening. The house is coated with dust because her sister is struck by this illness and is withering away. Lilith herself has been she's known since she was born that like she would die and like she would like bring death. So she's always done the most that she can to try to find a solution for her people. She's a scientist, and I think she's like 30 at the time the book takes place. So she's trying to discover new ways to try to help this sickness that her people are struck with, since the god is not helping them, even after they've been praying for years and years and years. So it's known that there is this like vampire who lives a few hours away from her town in this hidden castle. So she goes and she tries to convince him to donate his blood to her so she can do some experiments on it. And he agrees. So she starts doing experiments to find a way if she can use his blood to help cure her people. So over the course of the book, there's that collaboration and her, learning to like get along with a vampire. There's the conflict of the people of the town learning that she's, like going to a vampire as opposed to praying to their god. And then the god makes an appearance in the end, and she has to kind of strike up a deal. It's so good. I loved this novella. It was just like so gorgeous. Like, it was just so gorgeously written. My only complaint is that like I wanted more because I would have loved a whole book about this story, but it was only a novella, so I'll take what I can get. And the last book that I read this month is the fourth book within the, what is it called? The Vicious Lost Boys series. It's a series with 4 short books, and it's a Peter Pan, I was gonna say Harry Potter. It's a Peter Pan retelling, and it's a dark, also reverse harem book where Winnie Darling, who is a descendant of Wendy Darling from the original Peter Pan story, she is captured by Peter Pan, taken to Neverland, and within the story, they originally start off as enemies. So Peter and the Lost Boys are trying to go and dive into Winnie's mind to try to find where his shadow is, because Wendy Darling has captured Peter's shadow years and years ago and trapped it. So every like generation of new darlings that are born, he goes into their minds, like he captures them, goes into their minds to try to find where the shadow is, because without his shadow, Neverland will die. I have a whole video coming out soon about this series because this fourth book marks the conclusion of the Vicious Lost Boys series. There are going to be some spin-off books with other characters, but for this main group, this is it. And yeah, so I decided to make a whole video about it. But I will say the ending of the series was a disappointment for me. I thought it's another one. There's like a theme where a lot of books that I'm reading, I wanted like more short books that I could just like read, enjoy, and like feel like I am accomplishing something, because it's hard with a book like Crescent City where it's so long and you're not really enjoying it that much. Like you don't really feel that nice, like, oh yes, the love of reading. Like you're just feeling like you're just like, ugh, like things are just dragging. So I wanted something that I was like, oh yeah, like hooray for reading. I don't know if that makes sense. I think it's like the need for accomplishment in me. I probably need to see a therapist. But if you get what I mean, I just wanted to feel like I was moving forward with my reading. So I wanted like more short books, or I guess I leaned more towards those books lately, and this one just didn't do it for me. And that's it. So, okay, 10 books in 1 month. I feel good about this month. I had some books that I actually enjoyed reading a little bit more than I have in the previous 2 months of this year. And so I'm pleased with that. I feel okay with that. I am very optimistic for April because Carissa Broadbent is releasing 2 books this month, as well as an arc I'm currently reading by Laura Talassa, the one who wrote Pestilence that I talked about. So that one I'm currently reading. And I just have some other good ones on the list that I hope to read this month. So yeah, overall I learned that like, it's okay if I just read the short books that are for fun. And I've never really had a problem with DNFing, and this month is no different. There were some in there where I just couldn't do it. I just can't do it. I don't want to be bored anymore while I'm reading. I want to have fun, and I want to enjoy it, and I want to have like an emotional connection to the characters. So cheers to the pursuit of good books. Cheers to you for sticking around this long in the video. If you've read any of these, definitely let me know. I always love to talk about books so much. Please don't hesitate to share your thoughts. And also feel free to subscribe. It's free to you, and it gives me a little bit of motivation to know that there are other people out there that are also enjoying the books that I'm reading and would like to chat about it with me and other people. So yeah, subscribe, like the video if you enjoyed, and I'll see you in another video next week. Bye.